Hello and welcome to an update of the Perionyx, the Red Wigglers, and the European Nightcrawlers. If you watched my videos from the last time I did an update, you know that I wanted to restart the blue worms because the Red Wigglers somehow infiltrated that worm bin, and I had just as many Red Wigglers as I had blue worms. So that's what I did, and let me show you how I started that bin. What I have here is a 10-gallon plastic bin, and I am going to transfer the blue worms to this system because the red worms have infiltrated the blue bin. So this is how I start. I have here shredded paper and cardboard that I already wetted down thoroughly. You can see that the bottom doesn't have standing water, but it does glisten. You want the material to be very moist. I think, at least in my experience, that I wanted wetter than a wrung out sponge, which is what most people recommend. At least that's how I used to do it. But I found that my worms like it a little bit wetter than that. So no standing liquid at the bottom, but you want it to be wetter than a wrung out sponge. And I have quite a bit of bedding here. It's literally going almost halfway. So to this, I will add some used coffee grounds. And actually these have been standing and they did build up a little bit of mold, which is good. So I'm going to add that. And I'm going to add some eggshell, oyster shell, whatever it is that you have in your house. And this is for grit. Remember, coffee ground is a nitrogen source. And the worms need some kind of grit so that they can process the food in their gizzard. So you want to give them something like eggshells, oyster shell, diatomaceous earth, azomite, as long as it's, for human grade. You don't want it to be toxic. So just working this through, and I add either some compost, or you can add a couple of handfuls of garden soil. Just make sure you're not bringing in any pests, but that is to get the microbial activity going. You want that. You don't really want to put your worms into a sterile environment. After all, they eat the fungus and bacteria that is breaking down your food and bedding. They don't actually consume the bedding and the food. So you can literally leave it at this point and you'll be fine. I would leave it alone for a week. If you want to leave it for longer, that's fine too. I also like to add 1 cup of alfalfa meal. That's just my preference. This is also a great nitrogen source, but you absolutely don't have to. You can start any system like this, whether you have a bag, the continuous flow-through system, it's a bag, or you have totes, or whatever it is you have, you can start it this way. And I put in extra bedding. Typically, I will put in only 2 to 3 inches of bedding and then add bedding every week when I feed, but I decided, you know what the heck, I'll just add food and they can work on the bedding that I already have. It'll give them a lot more room to roam through here. And now I'm going to cover this. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to come once a day. I'm going to check on this because things tend to settle in the bin. And if I come here and I see that there is some standing water or not enough water, I'll adjust it accordingly by either adding water or adding a little bit more bedding until the conditions are just perfect. And that way, when the worms go in here, they're going to be happy and I'm not going to worry that I'm going to hurt them in any way. So I'm going to cover this up now. And the top that I use, I always make a nice cutout. I don't like a bunch of little holes. I think this is perfect and has worked for me wonderfully in the past. And I tape a mesh. I double it, sometimes triple it, and I just tape it. This is to prevent the fruit flies or anything, any bugs from entering the bin. And I will let it sit now, and then we will come back and introduce the blue worms to it. Well, now these guys are going to get a feeding because I did start putting these the blue worms in here. Hopefully I didn't do the mistake like I did the last time. I tried to be really careful and not put any red wigglers in here. Of course, sometimes they are so tiny that one or two can slip in. But for the most part, I think I did okay this time. You can see the bin is nice and moist, and these guys require a feeding. So their population will increase. I transferred maybe 200 worms in here because I really, really wanted to make sure that it was the blue worms. So now they're going to get a very wet feeding because this bedding is going to absorb all this moisture. They're going to love it. I'm going to feed right in the center. And it looks like a lot of food. It's really not. The worms will take their sweet time working this over. So just going to cover this up and we'll see how quickly these guys repopulate this bin. So now let's go over to our red wigglers. Here's the red wiggler bin, and the original blue worm bin looks just like this because I think we harvested at the same time. So yeah, the new blue worm bin has a lot of new material that these guys need to work over. But this material is well worked over by these guys. I think this is where I fed last time. Yeah, that's where I fed. They love these napkins. The napkins get saturated with the juices, and you have babies galore. Just a ton of babies in here. It's like a nursery. Yeah, so all these guys are working on this area, but we are going to give them more food. So let's feed these guys up. I think we'll go into this corner right here. Make sure, again, you're not carrying out any hitchhikers. They are so teeny tiny, it's very easy to miss them. And sometimes that is exactly how another worm species, if you have more than one worm species, can be easily introduced into another bin. You just don't notice them on your glove when you're doing feeding from one bin to another. So that's an easy way to contaminate a bin. Don't get me wrong, I do have bins where I have euros and reds and blues all together. That's fine. But if you want a specific breed and no other, yeah, you have to be a little bit more careful. So I think this should be good for them. Again, I give them a little bit of grit. Now I give grit basically at every feeding, and I just give whatever my house produces. In this case, it's a combination of eggshell, and I have oyster shell for my garden. I also have diatomaceous earth for my garden, food grade, of course. And so I can mix all that up and give it to them. Coffee grounds are a nitrogen source. They are not a grit source, or although it feels gritty going in, it's really a nitrogen source. So these guys are fed. Let's go over to the European Nightcrawler. And here's our final bin. That's our European Nightcrawlers. And this bin also looks like it's getting quite worked over. Very nice. Feeling for moisture here. You know, as the heater is working, it's important to really get a feel for the material, because you may need to add a little bit of water. And since there's no way to know what is going on at the bottom without turning it over, this is something you have to do. Otherwise, you could easily end up with a big old muck at the bottom while the top looks dry. So this is where we fed, and it looks like they're still working on it, but that's okay. I'm going to give them a little bit more. These guys are happy and active and making babies for me. And even though this is a very shallow bin, I found that they actually do better for me in these bins than they did in my 45-gallon one. Go figure. Okay, we'll feed these guys up in there, in that corner over there. And you have to always be the judge of your own system. Does it feel wet? Does it feel dry? Are the worms moving around? Are they lively? Maybe you need to adjust the temperature if it's a climate control area. You know, these guys are in my basement, which is climate controlled, well insulated. So I keep it at about between 70 and 74, 75. So it's ideal for them. It is winter, but they don't know it. I think I forgot the grit. Oh well, we'll just give it to them in there. There we go. And that's our update. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.